In today's video, we're going to be going over how to add items using BizWeaver to an external e-commerce site, in this case Shopify from SAP. So let's go ahead and open up BizWeaver to get started. I already created the workflow, so we're just going to step through this one step at a time to explain what's going on. The first step here is our SQL command. We're going to grab our item codes from our OITM table, and we're only going to grab items where our user-defined field that we added to SAP is either null or has an N. So in this case, all of them currently have no value. Either are null or have an N. So once that's done, we're going to hit OK and then enter our loop. Now what a loop does is if we have a large list of items coming out of an SQL statement, we can loop through each and every one of those items individually. So we can take them one at a time, opposed to jumping through all the settings at once, or I'm sorry, all the values at once. So that's why we're only grabbing our item code in this step. So we're going to link our SQL command get items list, and then we're going to then grab the requisite information needed from the actual tables. So in this case, we're only our step variable. So if we hit F4, once again, if you hit F4 and then you go to our get items list, and then you can get the item code there, which is this right here. It generates that automatically. We're only going to grab the item code, once again, the name, the on-hand amount, and the price. Now, the only thing I did here differently is I replaced did a replace on the item name, because there are some values within our demo database that have a single quote denoting inches, so we want to remove that and put a blank there instead. In this case, that's only special handling that I did for the item name. On hand, I just did a round and cast it as integer, so there's no decimals after that. So if we do a test run on that, we'll see that we have our on hand, our price, and the item code and the name from the demo database. The next step here is our data builder step. Now the data builder step, this is to build JSON or XML to send through an API. Now every API is different. Review the API documentation before you start. So this is just one way you can add it via Shopify. So this is not the only way you can do it. So just definitely review the documentation and make sure you understand it before you start building your integration into your e-commerce site. So we're going to use our data source as the get item, which is the prior step, and we're going to build our JSON product here, because that's what the API calls for, and we only right now need two fields, or one field and an array. So the title field, which is our item name, and our variance array, which is something that actually gets built later. So what we do is we're going to build the top level, or build the initial JSON, and then when we get to our second step here, which is our variance, we're going to actually set this up as an array, and we're going to name the array variance as per the documentation, and it's going to only include our price SKU and our inventory management field names. Now the price is a numeric, so we're just going to go ahead and use that step variable. We're pressing F4 to grab that from our get item SQL command. Item code is going to be our SKU, and in this case, inventory management is going to be Shopify. This just denotes letting us know that we're going to be controlling the inventory through the API. Now, as you can see, it's built out here. So when we go, and it's array that is checked. So once we go back to our items, we're going to see that when we name this field name variance, and it's going to populate as a field type variance, and then this data builder step the value will actually be added automatically as data builder get variance. So what it does is it will build the array in the JSON as needed for the API. So the next item within the data builder that's something that you can use as handy is our top level element. So what this is every time you enter a loop with this, if this option is checked within the data builder, obviously the top level or the initial the main JSON through it, it's going to clear out the old data and then add have it fresh so you can add new data. So in this case, since we're looping through one item at a time, we do not want to grab every single every time it adds a new item to it. We don't want to have that added to our JSON. We want to clear it out, because that's how, in this particular case, I handle our adding of the items. Some APIs require you to add the whole JSON string or XML string before you actually upload it into or import it into the API. So in this case, we're taking only one item at a time. The next is our web service tool. Now the web service tool, we're going to have authentication required checked, and we're going to select our connection as Shopify, as that's what we're using. Your URI is going to be based off of your API specifically. So depending on what e-commerce setup you're doing, you're going to want to review the documentation before you actually construct a URI. But usually there's very helpful documentation within each type of e-commerce site. Our method is going to be post, though you can do get, patch, delete, and basically any API setting that the API allows for each type of API call. In this case, we're doing a post because we're adding items to Shopify, and we're using application JSON because that's the type of file that it requires. Now, what's going to happen with our body information is this variable here, this step variable, is actually from our data builder item. So if we hit F4 and then go to our data builder items, you'll notice that there's a cumulative data step variable here. If we hit OK and enter that in, it's going to enter the JSON from our initial JSON structure and the array into this, so we don't actually have to build it or add it into here. Now, there are other checkboxes down here that are specific to certain types of APIs and integrations and a timeout. So if at a certain point, say if API calls are taking too long, or you notice that that's a common thing with an API you're using, you can limit that, how much time in seconds you want to stop before, how many times in seconds before you want to cancel the API call. So these will all be in the documentation if you want to do specific things. The one other thing I want to note here is with the request tool, or the request link here, it's going to actually make a call out to your API. Now in this case, since it's a post and there is no information available yet, it's going to have an error. Though if this was a get call, a get to our API, it's going to grab the data within that API specifically. So it's going to grab from that get call through the API. So once this is all completed, you're going to hit OK. And then in this case, I'm going to build a decision. So if it fails, we go down one branch of the decision. Though if it is successful, we're going to go down to another and add our inventory. So in this case, what we have is that if our web service call add item, the attribute within there, it's going to be a step variable, is successful and it equals true, we're going to go down our branch to our file reader, and if not, it's going to go to the add item failed to that table. So what this is going to do is if the item does not successfully add, we're going to add an end to it in our table using, we're only adding it to where that item code is equal to our get item SQL command variable. And then we'll end the loop, or we'll keep looping through until it's done. So, but if it is successful, what we're going to do is we're going to use our file reader to read the JSON so we can do a couple more things through the API. Now, in this case, for the file reader, it actually reads, it's going to read the JSON returned from our add items API call. So to get this template, you need to go into the API documentation and then save it onto a folder within your system. In this case, I have it on my desktop, but you can save it wherever you need to call it. So the file type is going to be JSON. The input string is going to be a step variable. So it's going to be, I'm going to select F4. We're going to go to our web service call add items, and then we're going to select output. Now output is basically the response, output string, I'm sorry, it's the response from our API. Now the template is going to be saved as a text document on your computer or system somewhere, and in this case the API for or the template for our JSON call for the return from the web service is going to be, we're going to use our root and then our root product variants, because that's what the API documentation specifies to update items. And then it's going to show you what it actually looks like when you select those items from the template. Hit OK. And then we're going to now update, we're going to get the location. So in this case, we actually make an API call to Shopify using the locations, using the same information you had before. Now if we hit request, we can actually see the location information. So this actually can be used as a template as well. So all you do is when you put do your get call, you don't need anything in the body because we're just doing a call on your Shopify store specifically, and it's going to grab that information here. Then we're going to read those locations. So same thing as before. We want to use the output string from the get locations web service call, and we're going to want to have that template, which we can just copy and paste from the request. And then once again, we're going to use the data builder as a top level element to get our location ID, inventory item ID, and the available quantity that we want to update. And in this case, we're using step variables to do that. The next thing is we're going to update through the API using our inventory levels. So in this case, we're going to use the F4 to grab the inventory levels data builder step cumulative data. So it's completely built JSON. And we're going to post that back up into the API to update the inventory. And then once that's done, we're going to update the item with a yes that it has been added to, where the item code has been added to the API. We're going to merge our decision because every decision needs a merge to make it work. And then we're going to end our loop because every loop start needs a loop end. Now, as more items are looping through, we'll come to this and jump right back to the front and keep looping through this until it exhausts all records from this query, and then we're going to end that. So that's how you go ahead and update items from SAP into Shopify using BizWeaver. Thank you.